Hi, Ginny.
Hi.
I'm so glad to be here with you today.
Hi,
And
everybody.
yes, and we're going to talk about something interesting, which is our choice to die at the end of our life. Is
Mhm.
that what you call it, or what do you call it?
I think it's the choice to end your life.
The choice to end your life.
Yes.
And it's really kind of a new topic, don't you think? It sort of like hasn't really been around for a long time.
Well, I think people have done it for a
Hmm.
long time when they've seen choices that were unacceptable to them.
Hmm.
I think as we get an older and older population, I think as you have more and more people like me that get to the end of their life without children and without the sense of obligation of continuance
Right.
that tends to be a part of having children and grandchildren, not to mention which there isn't anybody that is going to take care of you.
Right. So let's talk about the real core reasons why you are making these kind of choices in your life. First of all, let's just say you lived a pretty amazing life, right?
I've had some fun.
Yeah.
I
So
really had some
in your
fun.
younger years, you were like an artisan and you came up with these really cool ideas for developing like hangers for people to hang earrings on in their
Mm-hmm.
closets, and you
Yep.
made beautiful earrings.
Yep.
And you turned that all into like kind of a big worldwide business?
Yep. Yep. Started in a garage and had 9 guys working in a 6,000-foot building when it was done.
Wow.
I had a lot of fun.
And
My family came from China. My father was born and raised there.
okay. So, and then the place I know you is in the Yucatan of Mexico, where
Mm-hmm.
you've built an absolutely beautiful little estate on
Mm-hmm.
a gorgeous laguna. We have the breeze coming in the windows right now.
Yep.
And maybe we'll post a few pictures in here of your lovely place. But you built this place about 20 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm. 21.
And how has it been for you living here? Because you're what we really call an expat, which means expatriate, which
Yes.
means you chose to exit the US and
Yes.
live in a simpler country where maybe your savings would go a little further.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have a little more sunshine, have a little more simpler life. So, how has that been for you?
Well, in some ways, I wouldn't say I went for a simpler life because, as a reality, my business was doing very well. I had 9 employees. I mean, it had stabilized and it was doing very well for me.
Right?
What I was exhausted. I'd been working 60 or
Mm,
70 hours a week for a long time. And I loved it. I loved what I did. I loved the fact that I made the best earring holder in the world. I loved the fact that every woman in the world loved it when she had it. But still, the reality of it is that I was tired. And so I came here for a fairly extended vacation. And at the end of my time here, I ended up having the opportunity to look at some different properties. And then there was a property that I fell in love with. Fortunately or unfortunately, at that point, I had a brother who was only a year older than me that was dying of early onset dementia.
and he was what age at that time?
He was in his early 50s,
Right.
and the dementia started when he was in his 40s. And he was a brilliant computer programmer and a mathematician, and he could play
Wow.
hours of classical music without having a piece of music in front of him, and it was all gone,
Wow.
erased. So um, I saw that. I saw what it looked like. And I had also, before Phil, been the one who was the major caregiver and manager for my mother's dementia, which was in her 80s.
Wow.
And so I watched my mom go, and
And how many siblings did she have?
we had 5 children in the
You had,
family.
right.
I was the youngest, Phil was the next.
But you were
And
the one who
so,
took care of her.
yeah, my brothers opted out of virtually
Right.
everything.
So how was that for you watching them go through the dementia?
It wasn't as hard for mom because after my dad passed away, I think my mother really didn't want to live any longer.
Mhm.
You know, she was kind of just hanging out, and she was never close to any of her children. And so it wasn't like she was surrounded by people that wanted to be there for her and wanted to stay with her and wanted to take care of her. That this isn't what was happening.
But the condition with your brother, you watched really evolve into much worse, right?
Much worse. Well, in the first place, it was so rapid. And in the second place, my brother was kind of an unusual guy. I mean, he could play a couple hours of classical music without any music there, but the reality of it is that he wasn't the talker that I was. He wasn't a person that found it easy to relate to other human beings. And so when he stopped talking, it wasn't nearly as obvious as it would have been if I stopped. And so for a while, we didn't get that he couldn't talk.
Wow.
And actually, one time he was leaving, and I said, I need to find out something from you or something like that. And he kind of went, and I said, Phil, I'm between you and the door. I need to find out a couple of things. And he tried to walk around me, and I stepped into his way. And then I understood, because he stopped and he just went,
and he just couldn't
speak at all.
Wow.
Did not say one word. He just screamed.
Yeah.
And I was standing there realizing that we had watched him essentially lose all of his speech mechanisms without ever understanding really what it meant.
Wow.
I mean, that it wasn't a choice,
right?
That it was really going away. And so I said, Phil, you can't talk. And he nodded. And I said, okay, we have to do something about this. So then the process started, that I started looking for the ways, and because he was very active, I mean, he loved riding on buses, and he would hitch rides all over town on buses without paying. It was really.
And you said you went after him once, or went to some of the places he went, and somebody said, oh, you mean that guy that doesn't talk?
Yeah.
And the people sort of knew who he was.
Yeah.
And where was this? Was this in Portland? Or?
Yeah, at Lloyd Center, actually. A policeman called one time, and he said, I have your brother here. Because I had put a little thing in his steel that said, the person to call is, because he couldn't say it. So he called me, he says, I have your brother here, and he's got some problems. And I said, that's not new news, sir. And so he said, well, maybe you want to come over here. So I went over there, and he was the nicest gentleman. He was leaning up against a cement wall, and Phil was leaning up next to him, and they were kind of just hanging together.
Sweet.
And I was amazed that the guy had been able. I said, when I was talking to him on the phone, I said, tell Phil that I'm coming, so that he won't want to run away from you.
Nice.
And so he said, okay. And he said, your sister's coming. You need to hang in here with me.
Cute.
But it was an incredibly painful thing to observe.
Right.
And to see that he was incapable of following instructions. And so you couldn't give him any boundaries about where he was safe.
Right.
And you couldn't tell him the things he couldn't do.
And you said and how old was he when he passed?
I think he was 54.
And I know you have his ashes here under the tree, right?
I do. I brought them down with me, and then the Maya believe that the largest tree that is done down here, it's called the ceiba, is a sacred tree because its roots go almost to the center of the planet.
Yeah.
And the Maya believe if you put something beneath the roots, it goes to the center of the earth.
Aww.
So when I brought Phil's ashes down here, put a little tree that was about that big on top of it, which is now,
huge
I couldn't
tree.
get my arms around it if my life depended on it.
I had an aunt that passed from dementia, and her daughters and her husband took care of her. 3 or 4 year process, and she just shrank down into kind of a skeleton. She couldn't talk. She could barely take in food.
Yep.
And I think the breathing apparatus, everything kind of gradually just breaks down. So the body's kind of malfunctioning. Yeah. And a horrible state to be in. I mean, she was basically like a ghost in a body. And you've told me that dementia is kind of becoming a really widespread disorder among the elderly, that it's
seems like it. It's hard
Yeah.
to say because as you keep extending the length of human life, which
Right.
we have done, the normal termination period, which when we were kids would have been 70 or whatever. Well, I'm 75 now. I mean, you know,
Right.
it's not the same as it used to be.
Mhm.
So people are living to be in their 80s and in their 90s, which gives you much more room for that deterioration to actually occur.
True. So tell us a little bit about what, you know, what kind of decisions you're making or you've made, and how that's worked for you.
A little over a year ago, 2 or 3 things happened that made me realize that things were going away. I don't know how else to describe it.
And you had such a clear vision of your mom and your brother that
Oh yeah.
it wasn't like it was some.
And mine was so different than theirs.
Okay.
My brother and my mother and I
Okay.
mean, as I used to
You say you're more like your dad.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, I used to say, I can't believe I'm related to these people. That's how it felt. But like, and to be honest with you, I never thought it would happen to me because I wasn't anything like them. It wasn't like there was any resemblance in the way that our brains worked and in the way that we aged or anything else. I was surprised when all of a sudden I began to lose things, and they were just all of a sudden a hole in the fabric. It was just like stuff that I knew and I knew well was gone. The ability to articulate my feelings is what I've lost the least of. And that's always been probably my strongest trait.
True. And I'll say that knowing you, you know, it is a really strong trait of yours.
Yeah.
And you do seem like you're still pretty good at that. And so your friends kind of say, well, you seem like you're pretty okay.
Right.
Why would you want to be exiting your own life?
Right. And for me, there's a number of reasons. One is that I've watched it and I'm not interested in doing it. Secondarily is I have no children. So the issue of whether or not I'm going to hurt somebody else in going, that's the only one that was really a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm.
And thirdly, what are we looking at now? We're looking at a bunch of old people that are stuck in nursing homes dying of COVID.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, give me a break.
Right.
What is it we have to look forward to? And the answer to that is, in my estimation, no quality of life in any way that I would define more significant to me than my brain working.
Right.
That's who I am.
Yeah.
My ability to tell people what I'm thinking, and my ability to make decisions, my ability to look at this piece of land that had nothing on it, that had no road, that no power, no nothing, and turn it into this wonderful place.
Yes. And then outrun it as a beautiful place where people come to go on vacation and get rested, and rejuvenated.
It's been a real haven, I think, for a lot of people that have come here. They felt like they had somebody that gave them a protected place.
And there's beautiful plants all over here that I know every time you'd go through the countryside and you'd see a plant you'd say, hey, can I have a cutting of that or a shoot of it? And, so it's really beautiful grounds. I mean, you've done an amazing
well, and in
job.
the tropics, you could do some amazing things.
It's true.
I mean, you do these gorgeous bougainvillea plants and other things.
Right.
But it's been a lot of work, too.
So we know there's 2 states, right, that it's legal to choose to end your life. But only, I think Florida and Oregon, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
But
I don't know if there's any others. I
think it's only those 2. And I think it's only if a doctor has given you 6 months to live or something like that.
That's correct. If whatever physical ailment that you are experiencing is not going to end your life within 6 months, you're not eligible. That's what they call death with dignity.
Death with dignity, right.
I would take some exception to that discussion, but the reality of it is what that does by putting that particular marker on it, it basically eliminates anybody from considering that as an alternative in relation to dementia, because you're never within 6 months of dying at the point that you lose your capacity to make good decision, to have good decision making and stuff like that.
And we do see this as an epidemic, a coming epidemic of having so many millions of people who will die of dementia.
Yes, and as people, what you're seeing too is the same thing that probably people my age are getting into, and that is that they didn't have large families or they don't have children.
Right.
They have. I mean, so we went into college thinking, okay, there's enough kids around. I don't need to be the next mom.
Right.
And stuff like that. So you don't have the same kind of thing of saying, well, I couldn't do that because my children would be devastated by it or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
That's not the issue. My friends are going to suffer. They're going to suffer whether I kill myself or not.
Right.
I mean, they're either going to suffer because they watch me become a vegetable and they know how much I would friggin' hate it.
Right.
Or they're gonna lose me.
Right.
But they're going to lose me either way.
Right. So how would a doctor take somebody's life? Do you know legally what they do?
Well, there's a lot of things that you can terminate somebody's life with, but I don't think that any physician, and I've got friends that are physicians, I don't think any responsible physician would go against the law.
Exactly. But I mean, in these states where it's legal and they say,
they just give you a heavy sleeping deal and you go away.
You go to sleep.
Yeah, I don't think it's particularly difficult to end a life.
Right.
The issue in almost all cases is rarely people that suffer from dementia generally die the long, hard way.
Right.
Nobody puts them down.
Right. And so you figured out some ways that you can basically support yourself in exiting when you feel like it's the right time. Is that correct? Yes.
Yes.
And you've done your research.
Mm-hmm.
I remember somebody I knew wanted to exit years ago and asked me to do some research for him. And I said, the only thing I can find is the Hemlock Society. And they tell you just to withhold food and water and eventually you'll die, But if somebody's basically in a kind of a vital body, even though it's deteriorating, that's still kind of a difficult way to do it. I mean, I think to make
starving yourself to death is a tough deal. In the first place, if you want to talk about causing a lot of pain to the people that you know,
right.
I can't envision anything more than I would want to watch one of my friends starving themselves to death.
Right, which is kind of hospice. Once a person's lost the ability to eat or they're going into failure, then they don't give them food and water anymore, and they kind of slip away into a coma.
Right.
So how do you have any thoughts about the other side or where you're going, or do you feel freedom for your soul, or do you think about any of that?
I think about it a bit. I don't have a religious context.
Right.
That's not my deal at all. And to be honest with you, my observation of Christianity is that I can't imagine anything that I would find less appealing given their current behavior. I really I hope for the person that I probably loved most in my life, I lost when I was 20, and I waited a long time, 55 years. And I'm hopeful that I'll get to say hi.
That's exciting. He'll probably be standing there waiting for you.
I hope so.
Jenny, I've been waiting so long to hug you again.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I'd very much, and there's a couple of other people that I've lost along the way that I would very much like to fold my arms around and say, I'm so glad. Nice to see you.
How about some other contemplative questions? Like, do you feel like you've fulfilled some really strong life mission and purpose?
Got it. My early years were very, very unhappy. When I was 20 years old, I got to leave home. Oh my God, that was wonderful. I've had a lot of different things that I've done, and every one of them has been an adventure.
Yes. That's really cool. And there's fulfillment in that, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of anything worse than doing the same thing for 50 years.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I know you're a great seamstress. You sew all kinds of things. You're very creative. Your house is beautiful. It's filled with things from all over the world.
Yeah.
Kind of a gathering of eclectic, beautiful things to look at. How about, do you feel like you're leaving a legacy?
I don't know. I think what I've been probably the best at is loving people.
Nice.
I think that I've given a lot of support to a lot of my friends, and I've helped many of them through difficult times.
Nice.
And I'm grateful to have had that opportunity.
And we'll say people and animals, because I know you've done tons for the animals down here, probably put 5,000 animals through spay and neuter clinics down here.
We did.
Have really supported that kind of thing going on.
Yes, there is no dog that I see in pain and abuse that I'm not willing to stop and see if I can remove them from that situation.
That's really cool. And you've been a model to a lot of us down here with
Thank you.
I mean, I know we've run spay and neuter clinics partly because of the inspiration of you.
Well, I realized after I'd bought this place without giving it much thought, I then walked into the center of town and I looked at this dog and I thought, oh, he's sleeping. And I looked over and I realized he was dead. I went, oops.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
So much need.
Whole different set of rules here.
Yes. Yeah.
But there were some amazing vets who made tons of trips on their own dime to come down here and help. And a group of them came to this town, and I orchestrated the clinics for them. But they came down on their own. You know, they bought their tickets, they brought the medicine, they worked themselves to death, and we spayed and neutered 5,000 animals.
That's amazing.
That's about the size of this town.
That's incredible. Yeah, of the people.
And what happens is, out of that, because you don't have all those dogs running around that nobody's feeding, that nobody's neutering, that nobody is giving, worm medicine to, yada, 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 yada. I mean, not only did we spay and neuter them, every one of those dogs had been treated for any of the ailments that they had, and they went back out into the world in a much better position to live reasonably.
Cool. Yeah.
So those things are, my unhappy youth, dogs saved me.
Yeah.
So I just paid them back.
Sweet. That's really sweet. So is there anything you feel like you haven't done that you wish you'd done, or, still hanging out there going, oh, I wish I would have done that?
Not a lot. There's a couple of things that I would have liked to have done. I would have liked to have jumped out of an airplane. It seems to me like that would have been a fun thing to do. But actually, what I think about myself is that if I'd wanted to do it badly enough, I would have made it happen.
I believe that. Knowing you, I totally.
And so you look at some of those things and you say, oh, well, okay, it sounded interesting, but really when it came down to it, would you have been willing to leap out? And the answer is maybe no.
Yeah, I've done it. It's okay. It's not all it's cracked up to be. I mean, some people love it. It's a big adrenaline rush.
Yeah, the childhood I had didn't lead me to wanting to be a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've paid it very real. I had some kids that I took custody of in their high school years and stuff when their parents were just not able to take care of them properly. So I've been involved in different times in my life with participating in the life of younger people and helping, but I think I'm better as an aunt.
That's cool.
Than I am as a mom.
And kids need aunties.
Yeah, they do.
Need aunties and uncles.
And sometimes aunties are the ones that have the perspective because they don't have to deal with them all the time.
That's right. If somebody were, what are the things you've had to think about in order to make this kind of choice for yourself, to feel like you deserve to have the choice to die? What have you had to go through in your thinking to make this choice and feel really good about it?
Well, I made the decision actually about a year ago, and that is that all of a sudden some things begin to disappear from my brain, and they were almost random. I mean, a phone that I'd used for years, I couldn't figure out how to find stuff on it and things like that. And at the same time, my lack of comprehension in most things wasn't deteriorating very much. So there was something clearly that was failing, that was a piece of the deal as opposed to just a general decline. I watched it for a while without saying anything because I didn't want to be, hysterical about it or jump the gun.
Complaining
or maybe that there was a reason for it.
Right.
But time went by and enough things happened, and I saw the pattern enough to see to be convinced in my own mind that dementia had started. And so I observed it for a while. And after I observed it for a while and I could watch some of the things that were happening, I made a decision that was actually a decision I'd made a long time ago. I started talking to my friends who have always been clear with me, or I've been clear with them, that I was not interested in sitting around on some chair drooling while people took care of me. And so it was hard for my friends, because the thing that I've lost the least of is my ability to articulate my feelings and thoughts.
Right.
So,
you know, when you said that, you know, you don't want to sit around in a chair drooling, like, I just thought, you know, it's really courageous to make this kind of choice, because we're so attached to life in general. And I think people are really afraid of death. I think it's one of the big driving forces in our culture that makes people do crazy things. It makes us have lockdowns, you know, people are afraid of death, you know, things that are become blown out of proportion maybe and become irrational. And there's all kinds of other ways that you can see that. But I think it's really a courageous thing to say, I don't want to end up that way. I'm not willing to live that way at the end of my life. I'm going to make a choice to, and I've been one of your friends. I'm not, you know, like, you probably have other closer friends besides me, but we're part of the circle of people that you have been sharing this with while you've been going through this process. And most of your friends have been actually generally supportive of it. I think there's been some resistance from some people.
I think that it's been hard for a lot of people to see, and the inevitable response that you get from people that love you is they say, well, I mean, why would you decide something like that? And I said, because I'm not interested in doing that.
Right. And there is this fear of death that people have. It's like,
it's true.
And it is going to get here eventually, and until we get to the point where we can actually be immortal, you know, but in this current state of affairs, it is going to come at some point. And we are going to have to face it. And the question is, what condition do I want to be in when I face that? Would I like to be?
And the answer for me is that there will be no time in my life when I don't have some control over it. The early part of my life was the lack of that.
And I think that is really key for you and for these choices and these decisions. And what you shared with me numerous times is that you don't want to end up in a position where you can no longer make the choice. And then you're just stuck being subject.
And if you wait until it's there, you're done. I mean, you can't orchestrate it. I mean, everything that I'm doing now and thinking it through and doing it is trying to minimize the pain to other people, to minimize the risk to other people, to make sure that nobody suffers any more than is inherent in the fact that I have a lot of people who love me and they're all going to suffer when I die. They're going to suffer either way. I would hope that seeing me as a vegetable would be worse than having me gone.
Yes, I think. And of course, we love you. And I ascribe to the philosophy of there's not really very far to go. We think we'll still be able to communicate with you even when you're not in body.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'm not sure of that. And I lost somebody very important to me when I was 20. And I have some great hopes that I'm going to get to catch up with them.
Yes.
But I don't know about that. And I can't make that a deciding factor.
Right.
The deciding factor is only what I am not willing to do here.
It's based on what you know and what you're clear about. And you have so much clarity. And I also honor and respect that you are doing an amazing job of taking care of the details of your property, of your assets, your resources, your obligations, your business. You're setting everything in place so that it can be taken care of by other people. And
well, I worked hard for this. I'd love it to go to the people I love.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love for them to have as much fun with it as I have, and to have this amazing place on this amazing lake.
Yes.
And if I don't take care of business, you know, it's going to be much harder for that to happen.
So what advice would you give to anybody who is considering the right to die? I think a lot of states are getting closer to opening it up as a possibility, but it's still a touchy subject.
I think that the right to die is not ever going to be existing in the United States or anywhere else in relation to dementia. Dementia is too long a period of time
Right.
from the time that it starts until you get to the point where you wouldn't be capable of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the issue. If you wait until you can't do it, then you can't do it. Hello.
That's right. And I hear that from you over and over. And
Yeah.
you have a lot of clarity on that.
Yes.
Because you got to watch your mother and your brother. And so your plan is to kind of do this on your own, independent of anyone else, when you are in a clear place, and so nobody else is tangled in with your process.
Yeah. I don't want there to be any implications of anybody else being responsible in any way. There isn't anybody that has encouraged me to do this.
Right.
There isn't anybody that, I mean, the decisions and the planning and everything else have been mine. It's not, and there's nobody certainly that's saying, oh, what a great idea.
Right. Well, and it's because we all love you, and we love your presence here with us and all of that. And I know you love your presence here with us as well.
Yes,
So,
I have so much fun with people like you and talking but picture me sitting here going,
right, not being able to speak, acting like an imbecile.
I mean,
that would be,
how much fun would that be?
somebody changing your diapers.
Yeah, not gonna happen.
No. So, any thoughts, advice you would give to somebody who's considering, they know that they have some kind of an illness, they don't want to live through the deterioration of that? Anything you would say to
I would say
to them?
yes. One is that try and have somebody, some medical people that are sympathetic to having those conversations. They're not going to sit there and say, oh, let me help you, because they can't.
Right.
But the reality of it is that if you try logically to speak to people about it and explain why you're drawing the line in the sand in relation to your own life, and only to your own life. I'm not suggesting that anybody else make the same choice.
Right.
I'm making the choice based on what I've seen and what I've experienced and what I don't want to do. And I think that's my right.
And obviously, it's a controversial subject at this point.
Sure.
And I believe it is your right, according to the law of the land. There's a lot of things that make sense, don't make sense.
Well, it's, when we talk about death with dignity, I don't think there's very much that's less dignified than having a body sitting in a chair waiting around with nobody home.
Right. I agree.
And we're going to get a larger and larger population that are there.
Yes.
Their families are going to be bankrupted by the $7 and $8 and $9 and $10,000 a month it can't cost to maintain them.
Yeah.
They have no ability at that point to experience much joy or much happiness or much anything else. So, and I'm not suggesting that anybody say, well, I have to leave because I can't do this to my kids or my family or anybody else.
Right.
That's ridiculous. And B, I think that all you should do is say, what do I value?
Mm-hmm. Nice.
I value being Ginny.
Nice. And you would be really sad to have an empty shell sitting here that used to be Ginny and just having to.
It's my idea the worst thing that could happen in the world.
Got it. Well, Ginny, it's been really awesome visiting with you today.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here with us. We love it.
Thank you.
We have loved the sojourn with you here on this beautiful planet, and life's of adventure and joy and camaraderie.
Yes.
So
yes, I've had a good time.
Yes. So may the next adventure be as good or better than this one.
I'm hopeful that it will be.
Yes.
I think I'd like to believe that when we go on, that some of the lessons that we've learned we take with us.
Yes.
It would be nice to believe that there's an evolutionary process in our spirits or whatever it is that goes. And I don't have any definite viewpoint of what that looks like. I'm not saying, oh, hey, here's my next gig.
Right.
That's not.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Right.
And I mean, I'm not a religious person.
Right.
And it isn't, that's not what is the motivation here. The motivation here lays in the quality of my life.
Yes.
And that there is going to come a time not too far away when it won't warrant its continuance.
Gotcha.
So,
any other words of wisdom before we go?
Enjoy yourself as much as you can and love everybody you can.
Okay. Lots of love. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And remember, everybody out there, breathe, smile, and love. By so doing, we change ourselves to change the world. Okay. See you all soon. See you, Ginny.
Bye.
Bye.